What's going on, YouTube? Happy Wednesday to everybody. We're going to be broadcasting here a little bit of a different time. We're going to be taking up your lunchtime. And today we're going to be talking about the Bureau of Prisons, the issues with COVID-19. There's several prisons that are now seeing major outbreaks. And I thought, what better time than to reintroduce who many of you have already met in the past, Tom Root. He's going to be joining us today. So, Tom, how are you doing? I'd like to say hello and thanks for coming aboard again today.
Hey, glad to be here.
So, Tom, we're going to give everybody a few minutes to join. A lot of people are going to be catching up here in probably the next 30 to 60 seconds. So before we jump into everything, of course, I want to remind everybody to make sure you subscribe to this channel. There's links in the description of the video if you'd like to book a consultation with myself or Tom. Also, don't forget to text the word YouTube to 76626 to put yourself on our notification text list. And while we're waiting for individuals to join, Tom, give us a little bit again, for those that haven't met you yet, a little bit about who you are and why we decide to use you as such a commodity to the company. A little bit about your background.
Okay, my background is I practiced law for a number of years. I ran afoul of an assistant U.S. attorney and with tax issues. And the advice I always gave clients is think very carefully before you try to go to trial against the feds. I didn't take my own advice, but having seen the BOP from both sides now, I started a newsletter a number of years ago, but nearly 5, I guess, because I felt like accurate information was at a premium inside the BOP, and newsletter still goes out every week. I've got about 9,000 people subscribing. The newsletter is free, and I've set it up so that if you're inside, you can get it through core links. If you're outside, you can send me a request and I'll add you to the list. Was that enough?
That's enough, Tom. So yeah, there you guys go. For those of you that want to join Tom's newsletter, for those of you that have family in the inside, and we're gonna be showing a little bit of Tom's website here in a second, because a lot of what he wants to talk about is going to be the topic of today's conversation. I want to say hello to those of you that have joined us. We've got Kyle. Kyle joins us. He's been joining us for quite a while now. Thanks for coming back, Kyle. We have Robert. Robert's in the room. Robert Fuller, a gentleman we just spoke to earlier today, dealing with some issues with his son. Kimberly, how are you doing? Molinesque wants to change my name to COVID Dan from RDAP Dan. I don't know if that's probably the best of choices right now. Coyote, what's going on, my man? Pretty sure I just recognized who you are, Coyote, from Spokane, correct? D, what's going on, D Sylvia, one of our clients. PSR has medical info, question mark. We'll get to that in a few minutes, and we'll let Tom chime in on that. Bonnie, good morning. Ruth Spears, hello, hello. So everybody's here. So Tom, take us through a little bit of how this all really started into the BOP, what the BOP probably should have done different, where it is right now, and why this is completely out of control. And let me know when you want to jump into the slides you have presented.
Well, the BOP probably didn't need to do anything different than what it proposed to do in its multi-phase plan. And I think we're in phase 7 now. Problem is, by all accounts, nobody really did what the plan said they should do. If you get jaded like I do by reading all these government oppositions to compassionate release motions where they talk about, well, we had these plans and we did this and we did that and we have everything managed and under control, compared to what I get from inmates, what I get from the lawsuit complaints, and even a complaint filed by the BOP staff themselves demanding hazard pay because they said the BOP sent them to take inmates with COVID without face masks, without any protection. What it comes down to is it's an execution problem. The BOP might have been able to do it. Its plan might have helped, but the plan didn't get followed. What we end up with is someone like, I had to do these numbers this morning, the director of the BOP testifying before Congress on June 2nd that the BOP had successfully flattened the curve. Since that time, the number of inmate infections has gone up 118%. Staff is up a full 100%. we're up something like 57% on the number of BOP prisons that have coronavirus active. And inmate deaths went up from, I think they were about 60 then. We're over 100 now. So, it's like I've said before, it's the old Chico Marx line from Duck Feathers. Who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes?
So it seems like it's spiking more at specific prisons. And I know one of the first prisons that you wanted me to talk about here was a prison over there in Fort Worth. Why do you think we're seeing such spikes in specific prisons so fast?
Well, when people ask me how do you think it gets into the prison, I always throw it back and say, how do you think cell phones get into the prison? How do you think drugs get into the prison? Easy, the staff. Texas and Florida are two of the hottest COVID-19 locations now, and it's no accident that Seagoville has 1,156 positive cases today. Carswell, which is what we're talking about, the Women's Medical Center, 510. Beaumont, 468. Now, the top three are all Texas facilities.
And do you think it has something to do with the weather? Does it have something to do with the facilities themselves? I mean, I know it's a lot of speculation, but what do you think is a leading cause to why some other prisons have really or is it just some prisons are testing better than other prisons?
I don't think that it's necessarily a case of testing. Some are starting to test, and the BOP likes to use the excuse that we're testing, so we see more of an outbreak. But I think there's no accident here. By the way, the BOP has now tested something like 22% of its inmate population. So they can talk a lot about tests, but nearly 4 out of 5 inmates have not been tested. BOP keeps those testing numbers right on its website. For example, yesterday they said they've completed 33,336 tests, 9,700 positive. That comes to right about 29% positive. And when you divide the number of inmates by the number of tests, you find out that really it's about 1 out of 5. So they got a long way to go.
And when you talk about Carswell's a medical facility, and it's the only medical facility for women. And when you're seeing such a high spike there, people that have already conditions and known issues that are designated or potentially getting ready to go to Carswell, it seems like they should be on extra alert right now. And it doesn't even seem like the prison should be taking any new individuals. Why don't you think the prison is sending more? We spoke about this a couple days ago. I'm not sure if you saw the video, but if you have women or campers in general, out custody type inmates, and we know that COVID is so rampant through the system right now, clearly they don't really have it under control, and they don't know what we're getting ready to roll back into some colder weather here in the next couple of months, which everyone's expecting this thing to kind of spike back up. Why do you think we're not doing a better job at sending nonviolent individuals directly to a home confinement type of a situation?
Well, personal bias once again, but I think it is because the BOP as an institution is locks people up, keeps people in facilities. Perfect example, Congress did not specify any criteria for letting people out other than vulnerable inmates. You can send them home in home confinement. Theoretically, they could send someone with natural life home, live in your house for the rest of your life. The Attorney General limited it by specifying that, well, they got to have minimum pattern scores. They've got to be lower minimum custody, no violence in the past. And then on top of all that, the BOP put the gloss on it saying, you got to have done 50% of your sentence. Well, even the Attorney General didn't say that. Now, ask yourself, what does doing 50% of your sentence have to do with vulnerable inmates? And the answer is nothing. So we had cases where people with 45% who had COVID comorbidities that, 4 or 5 of them don't get to go anyplace. Someone with 51% who has one gets sent to home confinement. Makes no sense. But what it does serve is the BOP's interest in fulfilling his mission to incarcerate people. Now, some think that it sounds a little conspiratorial to say that, but take a look in compassionate release before the First Step Act. First Step Act changed compassionate release because Congress was thoroughly disgusted with the BOP. The BOP wouldn't approve anybody. More people were dying waiting to get out than were getting out. So, the BOP is not the best institution to decide who should go on home confinement.
We should really try to get a medical professional to come on here with you one day, Tom, because, there's a lot of individuals that are in these camps right now that have hit the 50%, that are still sitting there waiting to see if their name is going to be put on this magical list. And the problem that I keep seeing, and again, I'm no medical professional, so if I'm seeing this, I can only imagine that a medical professional will be able to expand on this. But if you're taking individuals that are at high risk in the BOP, and they're the first priority to potentially be sent home, but you have all these other individuals that are not at high risk for dying, but anybody can catch this. It's not like they don't have a defined determination of who's going to catch COVID, who's not going to catch it. It's more of, well, certain people have a lower tolerance to it. Some people have 0 to no effects. Some people have severe effects, but yet they can still spread it to the individuals that are sitting in there that will be the ones that are high risk, potentially going to pass away. Do you think we're going to start seeing the BOP send more and more individuals home, regardless whether they're high risk or not? And also, before you answer that, do you think that there's an opportunity to, when somebody's looking at the possibilities of compassionate release, that maybe the BOP either rejected them, they didn't qualify through care, or they don't have their 50%? Do you think a sentencing judge may look at this and say, hey, everybody's at risk of catching this, and those people that might catch this are at high risk of spreading it to those that could pass away? So it's in everybody's interest to try to get as many people out of the prison, even if it's temporarily, to a home confinement situation until this thing subsides. Is that something that we might be able to help facilitate individuals into marching down that path?
Wow, there's a lot in that.
That's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So
First, do I think that sentencing judges are going to do that analysis? Probably not. Sentencing judges, I have seen that so far have been much more concerned with how it's going to look. It's the bureaucratic mindset, and it affects the judges too. If they send somebody home on home confinement, or if the sentence is cut to time served, so the guy walks out and starts supervised release and then commits a crime, media will point the finger at the judge will let him out. So the judge has, there's no upside. The judge isn't going to get credit from anyone except the inmate for sending the inmate home. Judge is going to catch heat if the inmate screws up. It makes the judges a little reluctant. Fortunately, we have some pretty good judges who recognize the risk. But we also have a lot who are saying, no, you haven't done enough time. I don't think your morbidity is a big deal. We tell people on compassionate release that it starts with the judge. It's a real crapshoot. And if the judge wants to exercise his or her discretion not to send you home, there's blessed little you can do about it.
And there's got to be more lawsuits coming down the pipe. When you read the headlines, it's almost like a headline free-for-all right now. I imagine as a reporter for any local area, you couldn't ask for, if you're having a slow week, COVID-19 is forget about the free world. But these headlines, they come up, they're talking about went from prison to a petri dish in a span of a couple of weeks. We're referring to Miami FDC right now. In Miami again, Florida's on the hot list. We're seeing Florida spike all over the place. And you've got the reality of the real world where I can make a conscious decision. If I know COVID is out there, I can say, well, you know what? I'm going to stay inside and quarantine myself and lock myself in my room and spray everything down with Lysol every 33 seconds. As we know in the Bureau of Prisons, throughout the Federal Bureau of Prisons, it's not like inmates are given real hand sanitizer or any real sanitization at all. You're given a watered down solution that's, it's probably 1% Windex and 99%, sink water. Is this why we're seeing maybe some of these crazy spikes here in Florida? Because we also saw it just nail Coleman out of nowhere.
Well, I think that it is more a case that there's not enough you can do in a prison environment to prevent the spread of COVID. I mean, social distancing, and that's the name of the game. You got to stay away from people. You got to stay away from the aerosol they cough. And how do you do that in a dorm with 100, 150 people separated by cubicle walls that are 5 feet high, and there are 2 guys in a bunk, and they're right next to the next cubicle with 2 guys in a bunk or 3 guys in a bunk? You cannot socially distance. And there are a couple of epidemiological experts who have provided expert testimony in some of the cases. I'm thinking particularly of the one on Fort Devens in Massachusetts. And the guy said, it doesn't matter what the BOP does. You cannot socially distance in prison. You can't make prison safe enough to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And
you're probably seeing the question that Bonnie just asked. And that's actually a really good poised question, because we know judges can extend self-surrender dates. We know that for a fact. If you've got somebody getting ready to go into prison, their surrender date is tomorrow or next week, you can ask for an extension, and it's very likely. We've seen way more yeses from a judge on giving extensions because of this versus negative responses. But Bonnie just asked a question: could the BOP delay entry into the system if somebody has received a order to remand into sentencing?
Conceivably, it could. Those judges who say report, report when the BOP gives you designation, but most of the judges give you a self-surrender date, and you can't rely on the BOP to do it. Now, I was aware that as of April, the Attorney General directed U.S. attorneys to consent to any 60-day extension of self-surrender dates. Individual judges are doing that more. I have to wonder if they're not going to renew that because, well, you can see the spike. I think it's the, I've got the graph in one of the links we've got there, because I started a few months ago keeping track of it on a daily basis. Because
which link did you want, Tom?
Let's see. This is the BOP COVID-19 numbers.
Okay, here we go. Let me pull it up. All right.
If you scroll down to the bottom of that link, there, the blue graph, that represents the number of active cases in the BOP on any given day. We had that spike in May because of Terminal Island, and then it came down and it slumped in June, and you can see what's happened since the 3rd week of June. It's just been like a skyrocket.
It looks like my YouTube channel just going up and up and up. No, but this is the reality of what we're dealing with right now. And I don't think that, do you think that it really spiked this fast, or do you think they finally started releasing legit numbers, or they have the ability to test a little faster or more frequent? Because it just seems so out of the blue for everywhere, not just the prison system, but everywhere. It seems like it spiked very fast.
I don't know the answer generally. It seems that they're saying it had to do with people with opening up, businesses opening up, people just getting exhausted by the whole COVID-19 thing. In the prisons, I suspect it is a reflection of the COVID-19 situation in the communities around the prisons. All you have to do is look at the list of prisons we're dealing with here, with the major spikes.
And this is, and a lot of people are under the impression, right? Before, just to stay on that topic real quick, a lot of people that don't know that their families are getting ready to go in, or maybe you're watching this video thinking, why don't they just lock themselves in their cells? This is probably why we're not seeing it as bad as some of like the penitentiaries, because they have more of a locked in your cell type of a situation, where give an explanation, Tom, of what most camps, lows, mediums, how the living quarters are.
Yeah, well, you look at the list. Seagoville is the top right now with 1,156 cases. It's a low. Carswell Medical Center, Beaumont's a low, Butner's a low, Elkton's a low. And, the top in the low and the camps, everyone lives in an open dorm. In some of the prisons, there's a separator wall of about 4 or 5 feet. But I mean, everything circulates above that. And the guys on the top bunks, there's no wall at all. And that's the problem. If once you get to a medium or a high, you got 2-man cells, and they close and lock those doors for count. They close and lock them at night. And it's not perfect, but you can socially distance. I mean, the fact that it's not perfect is reflected in that we've got 122 BOP facilities, and as of yesterday, the BOP said that COVID-19 was present in 105 of them.
Yeah, I'm trying to I found a picture. Here we go. Here's a photo for you guys. As you can see this photo, and I don't know if you're seeing this, Tom, but the big photo on the screen. This is a picture of Coleman, but this is what you're going to see in almost camps and lows. This is about as good as the separation is going to get. As you can see, that's not stopping airflow at all. Even though it looks like 2-man cubicles, they're really 3-man cubicles. You can see the 2 bunk beds, but there's also a bunk bed that you can't see on the other wall, a single bunk bed. So most of these are 3-man cubicles, and you're sharing air. These walls are about maybe 6 foot tall. So they're not very tall. If you're on the top bunk, you're breathing all the same air as everybody else. None of those windows open. At least they no longer open. All of the cranks have been taken off. Ventilation is very poor. Out time to go outside where you could actually get some fresh air has been very, very limited to the matter of movement they'd have to do to get you there. So it's really created this cesspool of disease just trapping in a unit. It's impossible to quarantine these individuals. You don't have enough space. So we just keep adding to the problem. And I don't see how in any foreseeable future that we could see this thing turn back around and all of a sudden go down until there's a legitimate vaccine. You know, they're going to make the inmates take the vaccine. I don't even think they're going to have a choice. I think it's going to be an automatic upon entry. You get stuck with a vaccine.
Yeah, which I would welcome.
Yeah, in this situation.
I did hear something like 50 last night. 50% or a little more than 50% of Americans don't want to take a vaccine. All you have to do is know someone who had COVID-19. You'll take the vaccine.
I think a lot of people go on the conspiracy side of it, though, and they're like, well, what are they really injecting me with? Some kind of a nano device that's going to, track me. So there's a lot of, I don't know if you follow things like QAnon and stuff like that, but there's a lot of chatter out there that really, it's so easy to get freaked out when anything you read on the internet because everything looks official when you read it.
You mean it's not all true?
Not all true, Tom. We had a couple of questions in here, and I kind of got caught up in it. We had a question: is the shoe safer than general population at this point?
Well, generally, it depends on the nature of the shoe. The older shoes are just jail bars, and you have 2 men in the shoe, but you've got plenty of circulation up and down the corridor. Some of the more modern ones look more like mediums, and it probably is slightly safer, except for the lousy sanitation in the shoe. I've never seen a shoe that was clean.
Tamara, who's also one of our, well, she's not a client. Her son is one of our clients, and she brought up a good point. The population, she believes the population is definitely being weakened from poor lack of food. On top of being locked in not 24/7, but locked down way more than what campers and low custodies are used to. Commissary has changed. Food, not the recipes, but what they're serving people. The menu has changed. A lot of it's just bag lunches, not a whole lot of nutrition. Do you think that's playing a role on somebody's immune system as well, not being able to get proper nutrition?
Well, I got to believe it. As a non-medical type, I got to believe it has an effect. You get real tired of that. I lived through the swine flu back in 2009? I think it was swine flu, the swine flu epidemic, where everyone got locked down for about 10 days and lived on bag lunches. And it was no fun, but at least it was a fairly brief lockdown. I can't imagine these guys, some of them are going in their 4th month.
No, this is like a whole new level of mental torture. And I talk about it all the time, how my own prison experience was, not nearly as in depth as many others that have traveled through the BOP before me, but my 42-month sentence, but the 13 months that I actually did inside prison was overwhelmingly a good experience, meaning I had a lot of out time on the track. I was able to take my classes. I had RDAP. And that leads me to a question that somebody's asking right now. Molinesque is asking, Dan, isn't it better to just go in and start the clock and seek prompt release? Waiting to go in doesn't start the clock. Now, I want to hear Tom's thoughts on that, but my opinion of this is, I would say it depends on the type of sentence you have or what you're looking at. If you have a sentence that's 24 months or more, and you're a good candidate for, let's say, like RDAP, the Residential Drug Addiction Program, which can knock anywhere from 6 to 12 months off of your sentence through just the sentence reduction portion. It guarantees a minimal amount of halfway house time where you're going to get a minimum amount of 4 months. More likely, you'll see at least 6 months. It increases how fast you can come out of the system. So to ask that question, it's like, yeah, to go in, you want to start the clock. But right now, you're probably not going to be programming. RDAP may be shut down, and Tom will talk about the First Step Act on getting your programming credits for the amount of hours that are needed. With all these programs that are put on hold right now, it's much more likely that you're going to serve, unless you qualify for some sort of immediate release through compassionate release, you're going to serve pretty much the whole 85% of your time. God willing, you don't screw up and lose your good time on top of it, but you could be serving the whole 85%.
Yeah, at this point, I don't hold out much hope for any of the programming credits. God knows when the programs will start again. And because, a lot of the programs depend on contractors. If you followed how the BOP is scoring them, you realize you got to do it. Like a 500 hours of any class will get you about 2 days, 2 months. You get 2 months off, 62 days, and that converts to 2 months. So if you're getting 15 days a month, you'll end up netting 30 days. People had high hopes for the programming. You guys thought, I'll be taking programs and I'll be getting 15 days a month every month, and it's not going to work like that. So I tell people right now, don't count on anything magical from the programming at all, because Congress wrote it with a very broad brush and let the BOP fill in the blanks. And you can rely on the BOP to take the most conservative view. And we could do a whole show on programming and how they're going to count the credits. But the question was, isn't it better to get it over with and start now? Well, yeah, if your object's to get in and get it over with. If you are vulnerable, you're probably better off asking for the extension now, because you're going to find the BOP won't let you go home on home confinement when you get there until you've done 50% of your sentence. And the BOP right now takes the view that that's 50% of the total sentence as imposed. You get a 24-month sentence, you're only going to do about 21 months with good time. BOP says you have to do half of the 24, though, before you can get any credit. You're going to have to go to the judge and say, I just got here, but I want compassionate release. That can be a hard sell. We've noticed over these compassionate release motions that really it's kind of fluid. The sicker you are, the more likely you're going to get out early. But if you're really sick in a place without much COVID-19, no. If you're not very sick in a place with a lot of COVID-19, your chances are better. If you've done a chunk of time, it's better. It's hard for the guy who just walks in, unless he or she has morbid obesity, diabetes, COPD. If you can get 3 or 4 good comorbidities going, you might have something.
And Tom, you've worked on, I'm sure, many of your own, but even on a couple of our clients, individuals that they weren't necessarily at any risk themselves in the prison system, but the families on the outside with the hardship they were going through, where we had one lady that actually contracted COVID. She was a nurse. She was expected to go to work like 24/7, and she had children that were out of school. We were able to draft up a really good situation on a narrative when you built the motion that the client submitted as to why they should be considered, not for their own personal reasons in the system, but for their loved one on the outside. And we've seen those that have also been successful. So there are, I think individuals have to really be able to think outside of the box. And this is where it really is important to use the link in the description of this video, guys, and book yourself a consultation, because there might be opportunities and options. Nothing's a guarantee. Nothing is a home run, but there might be opportunity that you're not even aware of, because what you're seeing on the internet is very kind of shallow in the depth that it could go into. So Tom can talk about that. And my personal opinion, though, on getting in and getting it done is you've got time you got to do, and then you've got time, how long it feels. And if you ask a lot of individuals that have been through the prison system, that have been to a camp or a low, that also did some time in like a county jail while they were waiting, you ask somebody if they'd rather do a year in county or 6 months in county jail or a year in a typical camp or a low situation, a lot of those individuals are going to tell you, I'd rather do the year in a great location versus do a year or 6 months in a county jail, because your time literally doesn't move. So it depends how you want to be able to do your time. I would not personally want to go into the prison system right now, knowing how good I had it and how horrible individuals at the same place at Coleman are dealing with it right now. It would really rattle me to the core knowing what I know, because that would make every day feel like an eternity, where every day for me was like I woke up and before you know it, I'm going back to sleep again. My days were so jam-packed. So I don't know what your opinion on that, Tom, is, but you have to take these things into consideration. How are you going to do your time?
Yeah, very simple. County jail, you never get to go outside. You go to prison, and you see the grass, you see the walking track, you see the playing fields, and there's no comparison.
We used to call them house lizards. You know how you get the lizards trapped in the house for a long enough time and they almost turn like clear and see-through. We would see the bus bring in groups of inmates, and you could tell they came from some jail where they've been sitting, because all these guys look like the most pasty white of white you've ever seen. They haven't seen sunlight in like decades, it seems like. And it was almost like they were being set free as they walk out into the yard at Coleman. They're staring at the sun and looking at a basketball court and things they haven't seen in a while. So you really have to take that into consideration, guys. You hear all these great stories about Club Fed and the things there are to do there. It's still prison, but right now it's a locked down facility prison. Movement is very controlled. So you're going to literally be stuck with not a whole lot to do. Time is going to tick-tock by.
Yeah, we used to call it Christmas Day. These guys would walk in, it was like they were walking into Christmas Day. And they'd sit down, and they thought the food in the chow hall was so good, and you knew they were coming from county jail. So, yeah.
And so somebody else was talking about there's going to be a protest. Oh, here it is. Protest going on 27th in Beaumont against the BOP for not hearing and seeing their loved ones. What's your thoughts on protests, Tom? I don't really see them making, I don't think the BOP gives two shits. I think if anything, they'll just probably abuse the inmates for individuals out there. Hopefully none of these protesters say who they are or who their loved ones are, because the loved ones may be the ones to take the brunt of the stick.
I suggest the protesters wear masks both for COVID-19 and for lack of identification. Yeah. I don't think a protest against the BOP at Beaumont is worth a fart in a windstorm. They are controlling those people based on what they're being told to do nationally, and the people in Washington aren't going to care much. Now, admittedly, it's different in a few places, because I get calls from inmates all the time, and some places they only get to call once a week. Sometimes it's once a day. I had a guy call from Petersburg, and he said, I can call as much as I want to, but it's free and there's a long line. And he called and talked to me and said, I need to call you back. Can I call you back in about an hour? And it was like 2 hours. And he said, I went right to the end of the line and waited to get back up the phone. It took 2 hours to get there. So it depends. Depends on the place, but I don't think Beaumont's going to care what inmate families think. I have never seen the BOP care much about what inmate families think.
Yeah, I think it requires a lot of pressure from the real mainstream media to push them to do anything, which maybe the protest will get the media's attention. But Molinesque is referring to how often and how much the federal inmates eat, and there's a little debate going on in the room right now about how inmates aren't being fed. Typically, Molinesque, you're right. He's talking about how they get $300 a month per in food. They can stock up on their commissary. Right now, though, most of these prisons, their commissary limit has been way shaved down. and the frequency of when they can go buy and what they can buy has been very limited because they don't want to get the groups outside. They're trying to limit interaction with, because remember, the inmates are the ones that work in these commissary stores, packaging up the food. So all of this has been really limited. So the inmates are not eating the way that they used to eat. When I was there, yes, you're making burritos and pizzas and cookies and, you know, whatever you want. You want to eat healthy, you eat healthy. You want to eat worse than you ate on the street, it's like going down your worst aisle in Walmart and getting every piece of junk food you can get. It's not like that right now. Right now, it's people are hungry in there. They're not able to spend what they typically could spend. So it's very limited to what they're eating. They're definitely not eating nutritious or healthy or an abundance of anything other than maybe a lot of bread, as the BOP is probably giving you lots of bag lunches and it's coming with lots of bread and rice, I would imagine. Yeah. For elderly parents, here we go. Here's a question, Tom. Okay. Let's see here. For elderly, this is our guy here. For elderly parents, is there a chance that they won't be able to have visitation even when visitation opens up?
Well, I suppose any chance is possible, but elderly parents aren't carriers so much as victims of COVID-19. So I would think the BOP would just let them self-regulate, decide whether they felt safe enough to go have visitation. I just don't know when visitation is going to open up.
And even when it does open, it's probably going to have some crazy new limitations on, you know, I used to go to visitation where you have, you know, one person, a ton of people at a table lined up with families on the other side of them. Now even when this opens back up, I imagine there's gonna have to be 6, 7, 8 feet in between inmates. It's going to be limited how many people can come, probably limited to how often you can go. So even when it opens up, when it's back at its best, it's still going to be a fragment of what it was, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fairly sure that's going to be the case. It's going to be like the restaurants, you know, the 25% capacity.
Hanson said commissary is only $50 a month. I'm not sure where that is, but that is probably it's probably pretty true for a lot of places right now to what they've limited to. $50 a month. Tom, what can $50 a month buy you on commissary?
Not an awful lot.
Not an awful lot.
Yeah.
What do you think? If you only had $50 to spend, knowing you've been there, what are the things that you feel that most inmates are probably going to spend $50 a month on?
Well, if you got to communicate with family and with courts and things like that, so you can expect they're going to have to buy stamps. And once they buy stamps, they've taken a big chunk. You know, you buy a book of stamps, and what are you looking at? Like, I don't know what a flat of stamps is now. Is it 20 stamps?
The same price of whatever stamps on the street are. They don't mark it up. But even if you're like, well, they can use email. That's not free either. No. They got to purchase their minutes. What is it? It's
nickel a minute. It used to be a nickel a minute.
Nickel a minute. Nickel a minute. That's not a nickel. That's a nickel a minute when you're logged into the email. When you're reading it, you're getting charged a nickel a minute. When you're typing an email, you're getting charged a nickel a minute. That's why I used to guys used to pay me. Well, not pay me, but give me commissary or whatever, because they would type like this, type. They couldn't type. So they would handwrite something on some paper and then ask me to go over and type it out for them, because I could do, you know, and I'm by no means some kind of a typist, but I could type out whatever it is they're trying to do in a fraction of the time, saving them on their 5 cents per minute. Then you got your phone calls. You're going to spend, depending on if you got a phone service plan or not, you're going to spend $3.15 for every 15-minute phone call. That $50 that you're getting a month is probably not going to allow you to buy any food. I imagine this is only expanded on the amount of hustles that are going on in the prison, because now even the guys with money have to go do things to, you know, where I didn't need to steal food out of the chow hall because I had plenty of commissary. Who knows? I might be in the chow hall stealing chicken and eggs now.
Yeah, except no one's going to the chow hall, so it's fairly academic. Right now the phone calls are free. So
they are free right now.
Yeah, they don't have to pay for the calls right now. Problem is, in addition to buying stamps, anyone who's worried at all about staying clean is going to have to buy soap, going to buy shampoo. Pretty soon you're down to $20 or $30 free to buy some food, and you're not going to be able to buy much, you know, at that price, if there is much to be bought. I'm not the best choice because I didn't buy much food. I gotta say, prison is a great place to lose weight.
It is. And Sean Cowgill, he's one of our old, he was never a client, but we did a lot of work with Sean. He was one of our awesome clients that always had such a good attitude that we worked with him early on. We helped him out, and he's out of prison now. He said coffee is also
I forgot about
for
that.
me,
Yeah,
for me, coffee is a must have. You know, I guess if I was a heroin addict, it would be like, I need my heroin, coffee. Without coffee, I wasn't doing much.
Yeah. Hey, I can't believe I forgot that, because buying coffee was critical to me.
Yeah, and that, like Moliness just said, that can be $30 to $40 a month easy on coffee if you're a avid coffee drinker like I was. You know, that Keefe was going. I got a bag of Keefe in the cupboard back there right now. One of my clients sent it to me from prison. He put it in a package and sent it out.
I'm glad you got it from someone, because one thing I swore when I got out is I would never drink instant coffee again.
Oh, Tom, when you and I meet in face to face, our first cup of coffee is going to be a cup of Keefe. You and I. So Tom, let's segue a little bit. We've kind of given everybody, look, it's out of control. That's the point of this video. It's out of control. What should individuals that are reaching out to us, what are some of the things that we're going to want to see from them? If you're going to call us or set up an appointment, what would you like to see them come prepared to the appointment with, Tom? Guys, take out a pen and paper on this, or rewind this video later. Rewind like you're in a fucking VCR. Watch this again later and really take notes on what Tom's asking you to bring to the table when we do a consultation with you, because these are things that are going to really help us determine what type of an opportunity we have to work with you or not.
Yeah, well, don't know if I can separate it from the documents they're going to want to see, but the sooner you start to collect these documents, the better. First are medical records. Any medical records you can get before you went in, or once you have gotten in, get them from the BOP, that show you have one of the, what the CDC calls comorbidities. And let me come back to comorbidities after I talk about the rest. We also like to see a sentence monitoring sheet, this SMCD, the sentence monitoring computation data, that has the BOP calculating, it's the BOP's calculation of when you started, when you get out, good time accumulated. You get that from your case manager. Likewise, your last report from teaming, which would be, what do they call it? The individualized reentry plan - program review. Get that from your case manager, and get custody classification. And if you can get any information on your pattern score, all that's important. It's great if we have access to the pre-sentence report, because quite often the pre-sentence report mentions your medical problems. But often we don't. And if we don't, we work with it. That's what I'd like to see, those factors. What we do is we pull up your PACER report, and we get the docket, and we look at your judgment, and look at the plea agreement if there is one, and there usually is one. The indictment or the information to see exactly what was said. It's great to have a sentencing transcript, because we can get a sense of how deeply offended the judge was at your misconduct. Some of them are, I hate to give you all this time. The others, figure that not only do they have to sentence you, but God has appointed them to rain judgment down. But it's good to know, good to get a sense of the judge. In a few cases, by reading the sentencing transcript, I've seen where the judge, I told this one kid, I want you to get vocational training, and I want you to get drug abuse education while you're locked up. And so we were able to play to that, because the guy had become an HVAC technician. He'd gone through the vocational program, done well. He had taken the non-residential program. He's eligible for RDAP. But we were able to say to the judge, well, look at all this. You told him you wanted to do it, and he did it. So it's good to get a sense of the judge that way. That's what we like to see when you come in. Now, let's talk about, for a second, comorbidities. And this is one of the strange things where someone will tell me, oh, man, the guy's 350 pounds. He's got diabetes, COPD, end-stage kidney disease. And I'll say, that's wonderful. And, you wouldn't usually say that. But this is a strange world where a guy will tell me, I'm completely healthy. And I say, that's too bad. Look at what the CDC expects for or what they say are the risk factors. And I using the term, maybe I shouldn't. They talk about comorbidities. A morbidity is one of those factors. If you've got more than one, great. CDC changed them all on June 25. Added to the list. Hypertension was never on the first CDC list. We pitched it a lot, and there were some medical studies that helped us, but I had a few judges say, well, CDC doesn't say anything about hypertension. On June 25, the CDC did. CDC also decided, used to be you had to be kind of heavy. I had to have a BMI in excess of 40, which, imagine the Goodyear blimp without tethers. Now they've dropped it and say anyone with a BMI above 30 is at risk because of weight. I can tell you that when I read that to my wife, she looked over at me and said, "Oh, what's your BMI?" So it's a lot closer to chubby than grossly fat. So that helps. Used to be 65 was the age, and I had a few judges. I've seen a few judges say, "Well, you're only 62. You don't even hit the dangerous age." And the CDC now has said, look, it's a sliding scale. If you're 50 to 60, you're worse off than 40 to 50. 60 to 70 is getting real bad. 70 up, it's terrible. So age is a factor, but read those because I'll quite often have guys fail to, one guy talking to me who went through everything and he was just great. And it finally occurred to me, he said, well, Tyrone, how much do you weigh? And he said, oh, I'm 310 pounds. And I said, are you 7'2" or taller? And he said, no, I'm 5'10". I said, great, you fit. But we had nothing up to that point. So become familiar with them so you know what kind of stuff we're looking for. I see D. Sylvia has just asked, does mental illness count? Unfortunately not. But you can be creative because what the CDC says is any illness that affects your immune system would, and that may be depression. You can find a lot of studies that support you. So I wouldn't rule it out, but I see someone else has suggested, be careful what you say about mental illness, and that's a good point. You may suddenly find your
custody level.
Yeah, your mental illness level might suddenly shoot up, and with it, there could be a change in custody. That's correct, but
we've definitely seen some adverse actions taken against people that first off, many of you really truly have severe mental illnesses. But we've also seen individuals try to enhance their medical conditions or enhance their mental illnesses for the main purpose of they think that a judge is not going to sentence them to prison because of this. And what typically backfires when somebody tries to use that card, Tom?
Well, the BOP then has a ranking on your mental health. I worked with a guy recently who wanted to get off supervised release, and he had a mental health care level that was enhanced because of his because of the showing he made at sentencing. And fortunately, when he went to Cumberland, and when he got to Cumberland, the psych people checked him out and said, we think you're just an MH1, so you're okay. But his probation officer was jumping up and down and says, he's got severe mental problems. He shouldn't be let off supervised release. He should be getting counseling. And they were relying on what was said at sentencing. And we were able to talk the judge down by saying, no, you see, this is what the BOP said. He was suddenly cured once he got there.
D said trauma, it counts. Are you asking D? Are you talking about mental health trauma? I think what Tom was saying is mental health isn't going to could it weaken your immune system? I guess if you're overly stressed, you could technically have a weaker immune system, but how would they really gauge that? It's
possible that, depression, PTSD could have an effect. If it does, you ought to be able to find some medical study. If someone came to me and said, well, I got clinical depression, I'd say, well, let me do a study of the literature and see if I can find some studies that link it to an effect on your immune system. And if so, we'll argue. But that's what they're looking for. They call it immunocompromised. Don't write anything off, but CDC sort of said hardly anything is a ticket. So much is being discovered about COVID-19 all the time. And I put a couple links in here for it that are they releasing them to halfway house during the COVID madness? Yeah, my understanding is they are. The other problem is right now, 47 halfway houses are reporting COVID there. So, in fact, we worked on one, Dan, where she was trying to avoid halfway house because she didn't want to get exposed. And
you know what she did? They actually told her she was going to go home. And then it just like nothing happened. They just left her at the halfway house, even though they had told her they were going to move her straight to home. The halfway house told her they were going to go straight to home confinement. But that has to be, so when a halfway house decides to send individuals home to home confinement, at least from my understanding, is they still have to get that approved from region. Region has to like sign off on it. So if a halfway house says, hey, we're going to send you to home confinement, and they're waiting on somebody to sign off on that, that can slow down the process.
Yeah, it can. And the other factor is that without the CARES Act and the authorization for immediate home confinement, a halfway house can only send you to home confinement for the last 10% of your sentence up to a maximum of 6 months. And they love to do it because they continue to do the monitoring, get money from the BOP, but they empty up a bed, which they can sell to somebody else.
So D's asking a medical record. So yes, D, obviously, and I know your situation, D. You have all of these medical records, but it doesn't. Your biggest. So D hasn't been sentenced yet. So let's talk on D, Sylvia, for a second, Tom. She's going through her own situation right now. She's going through some real mental health problems that she's having. She's gone into a couple of places. Her question is what is the opportunity of the judge saying, okay, you've got severe mental health issues. I'm not going to send you to prison. I'm going to send you to home confinement or probation so you can continue. And I know you would probably need to know more about her situation if she wants to share any of her case in here, but what's the opportunity of a judge sending somebody with severe mental health? It's been documented. They've gone through groups and they've gone through inpatient programs. What's an opportunity for somebody like that to not be sentenced to prison when their guidelines are calling for prison?
I hate to say it depends, but how high are the guidelines, the offense? What you're talking about is the nature of the defendant, which is one of the statutory factors. 18 USC 3553 is the sentencing statute, and the factors are in A. And so I'd say I would have said shorthand 3553A factor, nature of the offense and nature of the defendant. Generally, under the guidelines, you can affect the sentence if you can show that the mental illness contributed somehow to the commission of the offense. But
and I think, honestly, I think she, and I know her, and I can talk to you more about after this call, Tom, and maybe you can have a chat with her too. That's exactly, it definitely played into, when you hear what happened, she's got a very unique situation. Almost something you probably see on like on one of these shows about like these crimes that happen that are just like, you would never expect it to these individuals. They're definitely it's a very interesting story. Entertaining if you're watching it from the outside in, but being the individuals going through it, her crime was definitely surrounded. Her decisions were clearly based on mental health, lack of mental health, especially what she was doing as a profession. So let's schedule a call with her, Tom. I'll send her the link after we talk. Actually, the link's in the description, D. If you want to grab that link and throw yourself on a call, maybe for tomorrow, we can hop on a call with Tom, because that might be some good questions for Tom to talk to you one-on-one about. So we'll talk more to her in person. If you have a detainer on you and you're in federal now, can you still get home confinement? Kiss of death.
Nope.
Absolutely. You can go to halfway house.
Not going to happen, I'm afraid. Not so long as there's a detainer on you. Best
no
thing.
halfway house, no confinement, no RDAP. That's kind of a bullet, unless you can get that detainer removed, which I went through that. I had a detainer going in. I had to get the detainer removed before. That's why I went to a low versus a camp, was because of a detainer. And it can be anything. I mean, it can be a silly detainer that just wasn't taken care of prior to going in, which we see happen all the time.
Yeah. And many times I just got one fixed for a guy who had been charged with stealing a pack of cigarettes in 1990 in Florida. And he had left Florida, moved to New York, built a life for himself, ultimately got into a weird white collar situation, but found himself in a low. And he was in the low because he had this unresolved charge. It was not a detainer, but it was an unresolved charge. And we went through hell getting Florida to give up on that. And they finally did. And once we got that done, he could go to a camp. But
so what Sean Cowgill is saying is partly true, but there are some other factors. Sean is saying when RDAP opens, keep in mind the inmates already in prison on the waiting list, they will go to RDAP first. Most places determine placement of RDAP based on release dates. So I've seen guys on waiting list in RDAP, and then you'll see a bus of brand new, fresh guys come in that have sooner release dates that still have enough time to take the program, and they'll bump somebody on the list out of that place if they have a sooner release date. Because as long as you have 24 months left on your sentence, you can take RDAP at any point. Doesn't mean you're going to get as much sentence reduction. So now, if there's a bunch of guys in there on a waiting list that are at the minimum requirement, then yeah, they're going to take precedence over that. But RDAP is based on release date for the most part. BOP makes big money on everybody they put into, not graduate, who enters into the program, the BOP gets paid on. So if they can bump you out of the way, put somebody else on now, and still put you in at a later date, they're going to do that strictly from a financial position. It makes good business sense. So don't stress too much about not being able to get into RDAP. I think they're going to have no problem if the gates open back up to get people into the program. Do you have a different view on that, Tom?
No, I just think there are going to be a lot of people who end up getting screwed on it, because while they can get in the program, go through the program, they're not going to get near the amount of time off because there's not going to be enough time to give them.
Yeah. And they're probably not like classes, for example, when they started my class, it was something around 30 inmates in a group. And that's probably going to be limited to how many people. Again, you can't sit right next to each other anymore. So now you're going from 30 inmates to 10 inmates. So do you think there's an opportunity that they might reduce the required amount of hours? Is there a way to get that passed somehow where they go from 500 to 250 hours?
Well, at some places, and it may have happened everywhere, but I'm aware of some places where they simply declared anyone in the 500-hour program who had 380 hours was declared graduated.
So they have done that. So is that up to the discretion of a RDAP coordinator?
That's I don't know. I don't know if it's got to come from region or central. It's obviously a BOP choice. They're not mandated by statute, so they can do it if they want to. I just don't know who makes that decision.
Lewis is asking, what if RDAP is suspended? How else do I get out early? That's the $1 million question. There's other ways of things, what we're talking about right now, but there's probably nothing as clear cut as RDAP. I mean, RDAP is like, you take the class, you finish the hours, you get the time off. We would have to look more into your situation, Lewis. I would say use the link in the description of the video, and here, I'll drop it in there again. I'm going to drop the link right now for you guys that want to book a call with myself or Tom into the live chat. And here it comes. Boom, there it is. I would say get yourself on a consultation so we can kind of figure out what is really going on, because everybody's situation is there might be some unique commonalities there, but there's also going to be very, very distinct, unique situations where there's no cookie cutter where it's one size fits all. A lot of what we do here is completely tailored fit. That's why some of you are like, hey, I want you to help me with a motion, and you hire us today and you call tomorrow. When's the motion going to be done? There's not like there's this template that, there might be some basic verbiage that's used, but what Tom creates for individuals is unique each time, because these situations vary from reasons why they need it, to the medical problems that are required, to the hardships that are out there in the free world for the families. So there's no quick, fast turnaround time. That's why we ask you to provide this information and then give Tom as much time to work on this properly with getting you and things change. Tom tells me all the time when he's like, hey, I had this thing finished, but I had to go back in because something else just got released overnight where this applies to this individual. And we want to update this because it's going to give them more of a shot when the sentencing judge reads this. So you got to remember, like right now we're in a fast moving, every day something is changing. They continue to create more reasons why somebody should be considered, morbidly obese, or all of these things factor. And the fact that it's not going to be the same as it is today as what it's going to be in 30 days from now. You have to really keep that in mind, that we're kind of rolling with this as it goes out. Is there anything we didn't cover, Tom?
I don't think so. I did see a couple of questions about Michael Cohen and Avenatti. First, Avenatti, understand that was a bail issue. He is pretrial, so that's a completely different set of statutes. That wasn't the BOP's choice at all. As far as Michael Cohen, Cohen's an unusual case. Cohen was originally told he was going in April, and then he got pulled off the list, and he was sent on like May 22nd. People said, well, he hadn't done 50%. But remember, the standard was you got to do 50%, or you have to do 25% and have less than 18 months left. They didn't let Cohen go home until he hit his 25% date. And at that point, he had fewer than 18 months left. So he didn't get any special treatment. I will mention this because this is a fascinating development that just came up yesterday. Everybody knows that Cohen got sent back to jail or back to prison. In fact, you probably read about how he and his lawyers were talking to BOP people. BOP people wanted him to sign this form agreeing not to talk to reporters or write a book or anything like that. And they said no. And some marshals came in a little later with the shackles. And Cohen said, oh, wait a minute, changed my mind. I'll sign. And marshal said, too late. We don't know anything about that. And they took him back. But what is interesting is—
That was over the book, right?
Well, that's what's so weird.
Cohen was sent back to prison over tell-all book on Trump suit claims.
Yeah.
I don't know how much truth there is in this.
Lanny Davis, his lawyer, said that that's exactly what it was. Cohen said it too. The BOP said, oh, no, he merely refused to abide by the requirements of home confinement. Well, what I can't figure out about it is, BOP actually has regulations that permit inmate manuscripts and inmate book writing. So I don't see how it could have been anything different. But now the ACLU has filed a habeas corpus motion on behalf of Cohen, claiming that the BOP was essentially doing the president's dirty work here by trying to shut Cohen up. And when Cohen refused to shut up, they sent him back to prison.
I've seen a lot of individuals. Actually, I spoke to a guy yesterday who's nobody in the real world, as far as he has no political pull, celebrity status, and he's just got violated for almost exactly the same thing. He started a blog, and I'm not going to mention the blog in here because it's very, very adverse against the BOP, which we may all be in agreement with. But this guy's already in a load of shit because he's on part of his conditions where anything he does has to be supervised, has to be approved. And I will tell everybody asks me, how was I able to start consulting right out of prison while I was still in the halfway house? How was I able to start doing YouTube videos? Dan must be a cop. He must be working for them because they don't let you do these things. I got permission for these things, and it came with a ton of conditions. My conditions while I was in the halfway house were, if you ever mention and address another individual's name in here, if you show any pictures of the halfway house, we are coming to get you and we're going to ruin your fucking life. So I was not allowed to talk anything about the halfway house other than my own experience. Like, this is what I had for brunch, stuff like that. Once I got onto supervised release, I had to get permission from my supervised release officer, my probation officer. And again, he was like, look, I'm going to give you a leash and you're either going to hang yourself with this or you're going to have a thriving business behind this. But if you start, you're allowed to have your own opinions, but if you start making my job harder because you're bad mouthing this and you're doing this, I'm not going to just let you do that and make my life a living hell because I'm trying to work with you on this. So don't just assume you have freedom of speech because you're out of prison and you're still in the grasps of the federal government until you're free and clear. And even now, me and Tom are talking about this today, how we'll hear a knock at the door and the PTSD still rings through your mind, or FedEx comes unannounced. At any moment, if they really didn't like something we were saying and we were creating such stress for them, don't think that, like Tom said, we are low-hanging fruit. They could still come swat us away and create problems for us. You really have to focus on the consequences of what you're doing. Writing a book, Cohen is no special case. You don't hear all about Cohen going back. Everybody was so quick to talk shit about him getting out. But we see a lot of people get out of prison for the same reasons Cohen got out. It just doesn't make mainstream media every day. That's my rant,
yeah.
Tom.
Okay. Good rant.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'll say is, if you are contemplating compassionate release, there's probably no better time than right now, because I can tell you the government will come in with its, and you've heard me say it, Dan, with the government's happy horse shit about how we have all these phases and the BOP's done this and done that and done some other thing. And you got the numbers. I worry that once you get on the backside of the curve, and you saw in the graph that it started falling off in May to mid-June, and when it did, the judges had less trouble believing the BOP. But now you say, yeah, in 3 weeks we've suddenly gone from what was like 2,100 inmates sick to 4,100 inmates sick. And it's now in over 80% of the BOP's joints. BOP has trouble selling that they've got it under control. I know in one reply I ended up citing King Pyrrhus in the Pyrrhic victory. He was reputed he and his forces defeated the Romans, but had horrendous losses, lost his whole navy and most of his soldiers. And he said something like, another victory like this and we shall be undone. Well, that's it. If this is a BOP victory in taking care of coronavirus, I can't imagine the defeat. If they'd done nothing, we'd be where we are now.
Absolutely. And
but if it starts getting better, they'll pitch it hard to the judges that you don't need to let anybody out.
That's why that, like Tom said, time strike now while the iron is hot. Sean Cowgill, who is a fellow RDAP brother, not with me, but in the program, he just said, thanks for the reality check. Sean, I want you to do an RSA on absolute thinking. So Hot Rod is asking CARES Act, and what he's referring to, that's Robert Fuller. That's the gentleman we spoke to earlier today, Tom. What Robert Fuller is asking, he's talking about CARES Act for his son. His son, I don't believe, has served enough time. His son is the one, I think he had the, it was a 100-month sentence that we're waiting on the PSR for. So the CARES Act isn't really going to apply to him, correct? Or
yeah, the BOP's, the BOP standard is you have to, if you have a 100-month sentence, you're going to have to do 50 months. Even though 100-month sentence, you ought to get out in 85 months, you still have to do 50 months before they'll consider you. There are exceptions. If your son happens to be named Paul Manafort, he can get out a lot earlier. Paul Manafort got out with something like 28% of his sentence done. And the BOP's explanation was, well, we have discretion, which is one of the weakest explanations I've seen. But right now, if you're not Paul Manafort, figure you're going to do half the sentence.
Yeah, so that's clearly they have the ability to scale beyond whatever their own internal rules are, but please don't go in with expectation of, well, if he got it, my son or somebody else might get it, because we don't even think you'll get a response, which is fine. We know that even though you haven't met the criteria yet, we know we still have to exhaust the remedy. And they have the 30 days to yes or no you or not respond at all, which give that opportunities when you can start going back to your sentencing judge. But it's probably not going to happen through CARES Act. I don't foresee that. And Hanson, thank you for the awesome, one of our clients, Tom and Dan definitely did a great job on compassionate release motion. It's in the judge's hands. Hopefully we'll get a good outcome for you, my man. Thank you. I don't like to share people's information, but when they throw it out there, I get to share it with the world. So thank you for sharing that with everybody. Guys, I think we're going to wrap this up. We're at a little over an hour now, and Tom and I have a quick call with another client here who needs an update. If you guys have any questions or concerns, please, there's all of my contact information is in the description of the video, phone numbers, emails. You can book a consultation. That's going to be the best way. Calling up with just random questions, it's really hard to kind of give you an answer without having some more detail. I know everybody here is needing some like instant, immediate gratification because you don't have a lot of outlets to go get your information answered. So again, we're going to try to have Tom on the channel more and more as this thing really gradually continues to go out of control. Tom, thank you for joining us, guys. I am RDAP Dan, Federal Prison Time Consulting. People helping people, communities method, one day at a time. Everybody stay safe. Today is Wednesday. I'll be back no later than Friday with an update on something for you guys. Love you guys. Stay safe. I'm out of here. Peace.